Hello, I'm Edo Choi, Assistant Curator of Film at the Museum of the Moving Image, and I'm joined by the creator of stories from the Chestnut Woods, Gregor Bozic.
Hello.
So, Gregor, tell me a little bit about the genesis of the work. How did Stories from the Chestnut Woods come about?
Well, it's been a long time since the film started to be an idea, but it was mainly because it's shot entirely in a valley that's very close to my hometown on the border between Slovenia and Italy. And this valley has been completely abandoned, meaning that right now it's very few people that live there. And since I was a little child, we would go to make trips there because it was kind of really beautiful naturally. But on the other hand, it was so obscurely empty and sad. So I guess that left kind of a strange question mark for me. Why was it like that? And when I was thinking of what topic to tackle as a first feature film, this was one of the ideas. Then Marina, who co-wrote the script and produced the film, brought a theater play by Hanoch Levin, who himself wrote the play based on Chekhov stories. And we have found the structure of the Chekhov stories to be kind of speaking the same story that happened in this valley. So basically, that was the starting point of this quite long journey.
Can you say which Chekhov stories it drew from?
Yeah, I mean, I hope the English titles are like that, but one is Rothschild's Violin. It's a short story. And then there's another one. Oh, this will be more difficult. But mainly Rothschild's Violin is the main one. And it's the story of this old man, old couple that goes to the doctor. So let's say the doctor figure and basically the doctor figure is the only figure that stayed in the film really like based on the Chekhov text, because all the rest we kind of completely changed while we were doing the research in the valleys, and we changed basically the stories to stories that were really happening in the valleys. So we changed, I would say, 80% or even 90% of the written dialogue and stories from the script, and adapted it to stories that actually happened and that were actually almost the same.
And the characters of Germano and Mario and Marta, they're all based on a folktale or real people?
Well, mostly on real people that became tales, no? Because of course, when a valley becomes abandoned and is so prone to emigration like this one was, it's also very common that for the people to stay to make myths or legends out of what actually happened. So it was a place full of let's say fairy tales, but also about memories that were not really, I think, historically precise. So this was very inspiring for us, and that's why the character of Germano is definitely a very classic example of a story that was very common there. So like a son that actually emigrated and didn't really say to his parents what he's doing, you know. So we found in the drawers of these abandoned houses numerous photographs where you could see that people that emigrated pretended to have a better life than they actually had, you know. So this was very, very common. And then Marta was also, you see, it seems inspired by the movie. I also wanted lots of animals in the film. So, hi, cat. And so on and so on. Yeah. So basically, the answer is yes. All the stories are actually influenced by stories that happened there and that are so archetypical that they became almost myth.
The story with the doctor that comes from the Chekhov, and then when Mario begins to build I assume he's building a coffin or measuring a coffin for his wife. Reminded me of actually an American writer, reminded me of William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. And I maybe you haven't read it or don't or aren't familiar with that story, but it's quite similar. And I was actually just wondering if that was on your mind at all. Yeah.
This actually, you're right. I never thought of Faulkner, even though I've read that story. But this is directly taken from Chekhov, because the character in Chekhov is wood carver, and when he gets to know that his wife will die, he says to himself, I will do the best thing I can do. I'm a coffin maker, so I will make a nice coffin for her.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I was wondering about how you chose to shoot the film, because it seems in the film that it's half taking place in everyday reality and the experience of these characters, but it's also half taking place in their dreams or their memories. And sometimes even feel like there are premonitions from the future. So you think you're seeing a memory, but actually maybe it's what's going on at a later point in this character's life. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about why that was important to do.
well, it's a very good question, and also a very difficult one to answer shortly, but I will try. So I think it was the core of this, let's say, story, but also of the atmosphere that we felt there, was this, let's say, magic realism. So for us, it was really a task, I would say, from the start of the project, when we were already writing the script, was a question: how to make a film that actually you'd never really know, was it really happening? Is it a dream? Is it, like you say, a wish of something that could have happened? And we encountered, of course, a big challenge in the, let's say, film language, because today 90% of films basically look the same. You know, it's a psychological story that you follow, and as a director, you try to kind of convey it in a very emotional way. Here, we were not dependent on the psychological world of the character, but it was all around. It was making a world out of the atmosphere of the places, out of this magical, out of this abstract. And of course, this is very difficult to do in cinema, because we are so used to some kind of psychological realism. So it was a challenge, and I can say that it was throughout the process a question, meaning we had some ideas how to do it, but of course, we had also to fail to learn that some things work and some don't. So we knew from the start that it has to be shot on film, because we've seen films that tried to have this softness, these colors, and they were shot in digital and didn't really make it. So this was one of the very good decisions I think we had. But the second was really to create in almost every scene kind of a peculiar atmosphere. And this is very difficult, because of course it takes time, it takes money, because it takes light, it takes set design. And for such a small production, which we were, it was a huge task.
Yeah, I was just thinking it was a remarkable production. And in fact, the first time I watched it, I wrote down all of the crafts people, your DP, your set designer, your costumers. And I just was wondering actually if you could speak a little bit about the team that you assembled, and where they came from, and what was sort of the overall ethic that you wanted everyone to follow.
Yeah, it's again a very good remark, and thank you for for seeing that, because I think it's really a team effort. And of course, me and Marina, we knew that it has to look specific. On the other hand, I'm also a director of photography for other directors, and that helped a lot, because you must know that, I don't know, one fourth of the film is shot just by me, much later, because we didn't have the money to have the crew all the time. So all these chestnut sequences, all the sequences without main actors, like the sea sequence, they were shot 1 year afterwards, and while we were preparing, it was crucial that we had a team of young people that were already experienced, but not in this kind of movies, because normally they didn't have the creative freedom to prepare so specific stuff, and for example, the costume and the set designers, they did a huge job, because when you come here, all is ruined, all is destroyed. So they had to build it, and it's not like we came there and we just shot, basically it's a real fiction film. So it was a huge effort. And I think also Ferran, the director of photography, understood that I had a big demand with him, which was I do the framing and he does the light. And he was really good in that. He made these light atmospheres work in the interiors where we had to make them. And I think this conglomerate of people that were young enough to really work well.
Did you? It's funny. I thought of Tarkovsky while watching the film, and I remember that Tarkovsky, when he made Mirror, he had a exact reconstruction of his family's home made because it was gone. So they had to rebuild the whole thing, and he made it out of these photographs that he had in his own memories. And I was wondering if, obviously not from your own memories, but if you did something similar with some of the locations here, if you had to construct most of it, and if what references or archival material you were using to do that.
Well, actually, what's interesting that you mentioned the Mirror, which was once one of my favorite movies, but I would say that as a reference for this particular movie was even more Sergei Parajanov, I think, in a way. It was the color of the pomegranate or the shadows of forgotten ancestors, I think. But going back to your question, it was crucial that we had research on the valleys, which was a photographic research, and that I did with a scholarship 5 years before started production. Okay. So I went around with a friend and we did photos of all these houses falling apart. So we could still get the colors on the walls. We could still see the wood details. And then when the set designer crew came, they've been here 1 month before production, and they established a net with the local people that still, let's say, either had a little museum or were selling antiquities and so on. And they could really precisely make stuff based on that photos. But as opposed to Tarkovsky, what we searched was a bit, I would say, an enhanced reality, because it had to have a bit more color. It had to have a bit more, let's say, of this fairy tale-esque feeling. So when we were doing the costumes and the sets, usually the pure reconstruction did not work. We had to add something a bit like a spice, let's say, of color, or, to make it more vibrant, in a way.
You mentioned that you shot on film, which was going to be one of my questions, because I was pretty sure, but when I watched it, I've always unfortunately had to watch it on computer screens, and which I very much look forward to being able to not do this time around when we show it on Friday. But I was wondering about, because film these days is printed, is made to be incredibly sharp and have a sort of neutral look, almost to be like digital, and yet you do still get this soft, grainy look. So I was wondering how you produced that look. Did you push the stock? Did you underexpose?
Well, actually, the truth is that it's mostly 16. Most of people think it's 35, which has these qualities that you mentioned, and it's not. it's a mixture of 16 and 35, whereas we use the 35 in conditions where I knew that 16 lacks quality, which is more large shots, like this natural phenomena, like the flowers in the sky at the beginning. This is 35, or the chestnuts at the beginning. It's also 35. But then most of the stuff is actually 16, and so while grading, we really tried to meld the differences, and we, you know, when we shot in 35, we used vintage lenses, not to be too sharp, and always the stock that was kind of more grainy, and the contrary on the 16. So we tried to balance these two. Yeah. It also depends a lot on the film scan. I've seen we did a lot of tests, and some scanners like the Ariscan, they are super sharp, while others like the Northlight scanner, for example, it's much softer and it gives much more this vintage look. You know, so. It really depends on the whole step, on every step that you have to do with film. You know.
When you shot, there's a particular sequence I wanted to ask you about, which is this sequence where Marta wakes up. It's the first time we see her, and she goes to wash her face, and she sees the ocean rippling in the basin, her wash basin, and she also hears it. In fact, I think she hears it first, and then she sees it. And this is what I kind of meant earlier, that there's sometimes the characters feel like they're seeing premonitions of their future, because of course she is going to leave. And I was just wondering, first of all, how you conceived that sequence, whether it was scripted or whether that was something you discovered on set and put together while you were shooting it. And also, you know, how important that was for you relative to the other parts of the film.
Well, again, I must thank you that you mentioned this sequence. I think you're the first one in all the talks I had in the last years about the film, because it's a sequence that's very dear to me. It's absolutely been scripted since the first time we wrote the script in the final version, because for us the film was actually a lot about longing and loneliness, you know. And it was a big question how to show a lonely person, you know, because of course there's no action whatsoever, you know. How to show what to create to show it on the camera that somebody is lonely, or you know. And so I don't know how, but one day I got this idea that she should, while washing herself, hear the sea. This was the first idea, and then. When we were thinking more concretely, and I remember these basins that also my grandmother used to wash in the morning, which were white, and I thought immediately, okay, but you know, it should be like with blue water, and then it's an association to the sea very clear. And so when we were in shooting, I realized that maybe I can also do, and this is I think the only CGI in the film. Because we actually used a double exposure of a shot of the sea I did for the other sequence, and we just used some waves just for a second, but you know, very subtle. But what you said is very, very right. It was for us, in a way, it was not really a memory. It was more like a hint about her husband that left. You know, it was a hint on the future that awaits her. You know, which was pure longing in a way. You
know. Gregor, thank you so much. I wish we could speak for longer, and because I think there's a lot more to actually unpack about your film. But I look forward to being able to do that at a later time. And for now, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you all who are watching for joining us.
Thank you very much. And I hope that viewers will enjoy the film. Thank you.